Welcome to hour number 3 of Overdrive, now on TSN 2. Jim, Tatti, Dave Feschuk from the Toronto Star, and Al's brother with you in studio, with us in studio, because that's where we are. Matthew Scianitti very shortly will join us from the CFL on TSN. Later on, Mike Wright, co-host of the Fantasy Footballers podcast. So a lot of football in the final hour. Tomorrow night at the X at BMO, it'll be Toronto hosting Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan 5-4-1, Toronto 5-4. And in the West, Saskatchewan and BC had really good starts, and both of them are taking on water. In fact, BC, I believe, well, they're 5-5. They had a bit of a skid lately.
Well, hang on. A little bit of a skid, but also a massive boost.
Absolutely.
In the arrival of Nathan Rourke. And it's only a matter of time until he finds his legs. And
I agree with you. But the West is much more negotiable than it's ever been.
Yes.
And the East is top-heavy.
For sure.
Montreal and Ottawa. And I don't know that anybody would have predicted Ottawa, but they're having a really good season.
And Montreal is just the class of the league yet again after winning the Grey Cup.
9-1, the Owls.
Pretty hard to argue.
And they get Edmonton on Sunday night. Hamilton in Winnipeg Friday, Saturday BC in Ottawa. And again, as I said, tomorrow night at BMO. This is a big game for both teams. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Argos, there's a lot about this game that's going to be big for them, right? Obviously, Chad Kelly's getting the start. We know that now. What's it going to look like? And it's got to look presentable, right? It's got to look good because they're at a point in the season where they got to start piling up some wins, getting some W's.
See, I don't know if it has to look good. I don't expect it to look good. I mean, we just saw Nathan Rourke, who was the most electrifying thing we'd seen in this league, when he left this league a year and a half ago. And
I expect to see a little bit more from Chad Kelly than I did from Nathan Rourke. I think Rourke has like the built-in excuse where he was out of this game, and as much as it's football, it's a different game. And he was out of this game for a couple of years, and he hasn't really started a lot and played a full football game since 2022.
Yeah.
Right? Midway through 2022 at that. So, I think Chad Kelly, he's coming in and it's the same offense, right? You still got Ryan Dinwiddie. You got pretty much the same players, personnel around you, a couple of differences, but it's all going to be much of the same. He could pick up where he left off.
Well, yeah, but where he left off was a terrible game in the biggest game of the year.
Okay, but before that, he was the MOP, right? Before that, he was the best quarterback in the league.
And then but I mean, if he were a robot, I would agree with you. But I assume he's a human being, and he's had a heck of a lot going on in his life during the first half of the season, in which he's been suspended from the league and rightly forced to comply with the league's wishes when it came to this suspension. And there's been a lot of turmoil, even getting reinstated this week. So I think it's a little unrealistic to think this guy's going to be a world beater out of the gate. I think you got to expect a few hiccups here. I also expect that both him and Rourke are going to be the two best players in the league before the season's over.
Yes, that I think we can both come to an agreement on that. Like those two at the end of the season, you're going to look. These are the two best guys. They are. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Those are the two most talented quarterbacks in the league. And the CFL, although there's some, obviously there's some warts to the Chad Kelly situation. They got to be happy that they're getting the two best guys back on the field, right? You're going to see a much better product of the Canadian Football League for the back half of this season.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no argument with that at all from anybody. Those are the two studs in the league.
Yeah,
they drive this thing forward.
It's good, but I think look, you got. I mean, I found it interesting that Argos coach Ryan Dinwiddie was basically saying after Nathan Rourke had a debut in which he essentially publicly apologized for his poor play unnecessarily, because as Dave Naylor of TSN said, like nobody was questioning whether or not he was trying. We know he was trying his best out there. He just did not perform very well. What was he, 8 for 25 with a couple of interceptions?
Yeah, it wasn't good.
125 yards. That's a quick turnaround.
Good. But I mean,
a 3-day turnaround.
But we heard Dinwiddie say, well, we're still hemming and hawing about whether we're going to start Chad Kelly because of what happened to Nathan Rourke. And then he just goes and starts Chad Kelly, no matter what happened to Nathan Rourke. I mean, I'd start him too. So I'm not sure what that rumination was all about. To me, you'll sacrifice a couple of losses if it comes to that. You're hoping you don't have to. but you got to get these guys their reps, and
But
there's no other way to get them the reps.
100%. Got to get them into mid-season form as quick as possible. And the only way to do that is by in-game reps. You can simulate all you want in practice, go through all the practice reps you want, but there's nothing like the real game, right? So I think that's probably the correct decision when you look at the Argos from a football perspective to roll with them. We'll see what it looks like tomorrow night, though.
All right, let's bring in Matthew Scianitti from the CFL on TSN. Matthew, welcome. How are you today, sir?
I'm good, Jim. Boys, how are we?
We're doing well, and I guess on the football angle of the Chad Kelly return is because the comparable is there for Nathan Rourke. We're wondering, how game ready is he? Obviously, if the coaching staff designates him as the starter, he is ready. But what's your take on what he's been able to do in his time away from the team to get ready?
Yeah, well, let's focus on Chad Kelly and getting back on the field first. It's been made pretty clear to all of us that he's been training with his throwing coach in New York State while he had been on that 9-game suspension. When he was permitted, he was in the facility, not practicing with the team, but with it on his own, meeting with quarterback coach Mike Miller. And beyond all of the other things that I know that we'll get to, there's going to be so much scrutiny on Chad Kelly playing, because the last time we saw him, he absolutely laid an egg in the East Final, throwing 4 interceptions, many of which I think we're all still scratching our heads. And then, of course, there was the insinuation, or him saying that he had a concussion afterwards, and then the situation around that. But him getting back on the field certainly looks on paper, as the quarterback who led them to a 16-2 record last season, as the best option. And in practice, he looked throwing it as the first-team quarterback in Skelly, which is no offensive and defensive linemen, so basically just one-on-ones between receivers and the defensive backs. First-team offense where everyone is moving in their assigned positions during a play. Kelly looks sharp, especially on the deep ball, and head coach Ryan Dinwiddie has said they want to push the ball downfield. Right now, the Argos are middling. They're right in the middle of the pack, but they've got to chase both the Red Blacks and especially the Montreal Alouettes. And the guy who proved that he can put up points last season was Chad Kelly, but there's so much more expectation on him now, obviously, because of all the context around his return.
Well, how do you think that the team and Chad Kelly himself, I guess, have handled the situation this week with him returning?
It's been a very manicured message, and rightfully so. I spoke to Ryan Dinwiddie today, and he said we have to run into this situation, meaning the scrutiny, meaning the expectation that the Argos will have to improve their, not only just their locker room culture, but their team culture as well. And Kelly certainly got in front of the press yesterday and was apologizing the questions that he would answer, mind you. But the fact is, the temperature is going to be turned up. It doesn't take long to go on social media, and I'm sure you've all done it, to see those involved in the CFL, fans and just fans of other leagues who are observing this from the outside. And Chad Kelly, remember, was the headline last year when the Argos had their record regular season run, where everyone was paying attention to the Argos because of Chad Kelly. Many people do not want him back. And certainly he's been saying all the right things, but speaking to veterans on background, I can tell you that many of them want to see consistency. Ryan Dinwiddie talked about it being a roar that the team gave Kelly when he came back, when he was officially reinstated. And that is genuine. Chad Kelly's talent is welcome back into the locker room. One veteran, though, described it as kind of how much is too much. Welcoming back a family member who has kind of hurt the trust of other people within his family. And people want to embrace him in that locker room, but they want to see if he's going to be consistent in his messaging. It's one thing when you're in front of the media saying all the right things, talking to the commissioner, agreeing to your last chance agreement, going through all the courses, doing everything that's required of you during a 9-game suspension. But when you're going to face what we expect to be a larger crowd tomorrow, and many of them are not going to be fans of Chad Kelly, and then I
think he dropped out there. Can we get him back? I think there was an issue there. It seemed like he was the connection was wavering anyway.
Well, he was getting to the point about the fan base, which is going to be interesting. I would imagine they'll probably be pretty split. I think there'll be some people who aren't happy that he's back, and there's going to be some cheers out there that could be happy that
Matthew,
their
sir,
quarterback is back.
Welcome back in. Sorry we lost you there. If you can continue on where you were.
No problem, guys. The fact is this. Doesn't matter how many things Chad Kelly says well in front of camera. Doesn't matter how many things he says well to his other players and teammates in the locker room. The Argos have built a very strong player-led culture that won them the Grey Cup in 2022, that got them to 16-2 in 2023. And the veterans in that room have said to me, we want to see him be consistent because he's going to go up against the Saskatchewan Roughriders tomorrow. A lot of Rider fans will be in Toronto. A lot of fans will be in the stands, and many of them will not be happy to see him back. And then when he goes to Tim Hortons Field, the Hamilton Tiger Cat fans who have been very vocal on social media about this can't wait to see him. And they're going to express their opinions. And I think this is the absolute point. Take the circumstances out of it. It's not that they're irrelevant. They're absolutely important. Jack Kelly got suspended 9 games for them. But he is back now, and he is the starting quarterback of a professional football team. That comes with responsibilities and expectations. As a player told me today, he's in the C-suite. He's an executive, which means he's held to a different kind of standard than everybody else. And that standard, his teammates want to see if he's going to be consistently hitting that.
Well, Matthew, there's a standard he's being held to within that locker room, I'm sure, as there is in every locker room. But there's also a standard that the league has essentially applied here under the terms of his reinstatement, and it's essentially the way Dave Naylor, our CFL insider, has described it. It's a last chance clause in the reinstatement agreement here, and we know the history of Chad Kelly's checkered career, where this is not the first football team he has let down with inappropriate actions off the field. What do you make of the last chance agreement here and what it says about the league's faith or lack thereof in Chad Kelly and how it might affect the way this season proceeds?
I would say, Dave, that it's a consequence of maybe the experience we had when Johnny Manziel came up to the CFL. And the once bitten, twice shy maybe approach that Randy Ambrosie's taken to this, but I think you hit the nail on the head. This is Chad Kelly's reputation that has followed him. No one else has been put in the situations that are on the record that Chad Kelly has been put in. I spent a lot of time around him over the last 2 seasons. Certainly saw from McLeod Bethel-Thompson through Ryan Dinwiddie, through linebacker Wint McManus, through everyone in that locker room, tried to go and lead him on a path to becoming a better leader. And we all thought that he was that way, certainly when the Argos went on their run last year. But he found himself into a situation in which he received a 9-game suspension. And it was so serious that the commissioner of the Canadian Football League said to him, that's it. And I know Dave Naylor reported that there was perhaps some disagreement on Kelly's side with his representation about that last chance agreement, but that is within the CFL's right to do that. The fact every league has a standard, a culture, the way it likes to be perceived in the community, not just with fans, but with sponsors. Leagues are a business, but there's something different about the CFL. It is very much a community. It's a small league and a small community, but there are millions of people across the country who value it very, very much. And I imagine that Randy Ambrosie certainly would not have been blind to that, as I'm sure were some of the members of the Canadian Football League Players Association. Although I haven't had an opportunity to speak to them, I imagine that everyone right now, not to repeat myself, but it is true, Chad Kelly is going to have the temperature turned up on him with not only a playoff run that the Argos are trying to put themselves in the East, not only with him getting back on the field and showing that he's improved, certainly after his disappointing performance the last time we saw him on the field, but how he's going to react to the fans and how he's going to react to his own teammates and how he's going to react, frankly, to players. You know, I was speaking to some Rough Riders today who were saying, absolutely, we're aware of what's going on in the media. Absolutely, we're hearing and listening. And these are competitors. And one wonders, I'm not implying headhunting on the field, mind you, but one wonders what those kind of interactions will be on the field. As the starting quarterback of the Toronto Argonauts, Chad Kelly's going to have to deal with all of that. And that is his responsibility because he's under center, because he was the highest paid player of the league last year. And above all, he was named the MOP. And clearly last year, when he gave his emotional speech accepting it, it clearly meant something to him. Well, those actions are going to have to speak louder than those words last year.
You know, Matthew, that's extremely well said. And you know, again, everybody understands where the league stands on this. We heard the apology, but it reverts to, or I guess refers to, inappropriate behavior by somebody in public life. That's a difficult thing to push aside. So I think we're all intrigued by how this moves forward. Whatever side of the equation you're on, and whether you agree with it or not, I think most people are pretty curious to see how this thing weathers, how it moves forward, and if it does move forward. I mean, I don't really have the answer to that because I think this is pretty rare stuff.
The ball is in his hands, Jim. He wanted the response 2 years ago when McLeod Thompson was the starting quarterback at the Toronto Argonauts. Chad Kelly made it clear that he wanted to be the starting quarterback. He said as much to me, and not verbatim, but made that pretty clear to me. Last year, he kept on saying, "Go Argos," every time that he put his helmet on, every time I finished an interview with him. That is not my job to be judge and jury of Chad Kelly. The fact of the matter is, when he gets under center, the ball is in his hands. All eyes are on him. This, whatever situation, however you want to describe it, whatever position you find yourself in on the argument, he was punished. Now he's back, but that does not dismiss. He can serve all his time and all of that, but that does not wipe the slate clean. Clearly not from the CFL's perspective, clearly not from many CFL fans' perspective, and the only person who can answer all those questions with his actions is going to be Chad Kelly.
Obviously, the Chad Kelly situation a bit difficult. It's a little bit more of a popular situation out west was the return of Nathan Rourke to the CFL last week, and it didn't go so rosy for him in his first start. But how long do you think it's before Nathan Rourke is back to being the premier CFL quarterback that he showed he could be back in 2022?
I think we're talking about two different quarterbacks with two different mentalities. Not that I'm trying to directly compare, but they both play the quarterback position. And to be quite frank, they are the two quarterbacks in the CFL that move the needle. When people talk about Nathan Rourke, everyone pays attention. When people talk about Chad Kelly, everyone pays attention. But the difference is this. They're both extremely talented quarterbacks. The judgment of Chad Kelly, his attitude and how he approaches and treats situations is under the microscope. I don't think the same is true for Nathan Rourke. This is a guy who went through pretty much an itinerant and very, very difficult few months going into NFL camps and having to impress, having to, I imagine, play the political game, make sure he minds his P's and Q's, make sure that he distinguishes himself, even though he's further down on the depth chart or on the practice roster. And you could tell it did not need a quarterback whisper for anyone not to see last weekend that there were some throws that were very un-Nathan Rourke-like. He has an incredible zip on the ball, but passes were going high. He seemed to be stuffing balls into windows. His interceptions, he wasn't tracking the man underneath. But I don't think anyone dismisses the fact that Nathan Rourke needed time. Did head coach Rick Campbell maybe put him out to the wolves there with an incredible Winnipeg Blue Bombers team that has done, irrespective of debates about where that team and the dynasty that they have built is now, that defense, even as it ages, I won't say old because I know some of those guys, the Adam Big Hills and Willie Jeffersons, will take exception to that, but they were veteran and they were savvy, and they really did go ahead and dissect everything that Nathan Rourke was doing. I mean, I don't think my colleague Farhan Longy has said already that he did not expect that out of Nathan Rourke, but everyone knows the quality of Nathan Rourke as a quarterback in the Canadian Football League. I don't think anyone doubts that he will get better. Did he need some time? Yes. Might this have been, that loss or that opportunity in that game was sacrificed so that he can get the reps, those in-game reps that he wasn't getting, and in the time that he spent down working in the 11-man game in the NFL? Perhaps. But Nathan Rourke is a star quarterback in the CFL. Nathan Rourke will show himself, I imagine, and either way, he better, because if you look at the standings in the West, it has not been like this, as crowded as it is in the West for a long time. But Nathan Rourke is a star, and I fully expect him to go ahead and bounce back.
Let's go big picture a little bit here, Scianitti. When you look at the Argos season last year, right? They go 16-2. There are people saying it might be the best CFL team that we've ever seen, or certainly in that conversation, and yet they get absolutely decimated in the Eastern Final by the Montreal Alouettes. Fast forward to today, the Alouettes, since winning the Grey Cup, they're 9-1. Are they in the running here in the coming few weeks, Matthew, to be considered maybe one of the best teams in CFL history?
Dave, if any of your listeners aren't watching the Montreal Alouettes, now that they have Austin Mack back, that incredible deep ball receiver who made an incredible catch in the 110th Grey Cup last year, they better start watching them, because this team is dangerous. And they've been doing this the last couple of weeks with their backup quarterback, Davis Alexander, who very might be that next great young CFL quarterback. Over the last few seasons, we've been waiting for one, and he has the arm and he has the savviness, and certainly he's got the gumption to win games. Go back and watch his run to win that game, to seal that win against the Saskatchewan Roughriders, to go in to Regina and pull off a huge win. Montreal, I was there just a couple of weeks ago. This team can beat you so many different ways. They can beat you in the return game. They can beat you on defense. Linebacker Darnell Sankey basically took Bo Levi Mitchell's job away in Hamilton with an early pick that he had, although there were a few more circumstances and decisions that were behind that besides just the pick. And then you have their offense with Charleston Rambo coming in with, who's a brand new receiving star in this league. Austin Mack coming back. Tyson Philpott is injured, but we know he can be a clutch receiver in the way that he won the Grey Cup in the last moments last year. This team has everything. And, we might even get a quarterback controversy. Who knows? Because Cody Fajardo is a championship-winning quarterback in this league. But if he comes back from his hamstring injury and doesn't click the way that the Alouettes need him to click, given how well they're playing, maybe they put Davis Alexander in. And it's not the first time in the CFL where we would have seen great teams play two different quarterbacks. But right now, undeniably, the Montreal Alouettes are the best team in the CFL. And if anyone has a mind to go watch some great football atmosphere, what's happening in Montreal? When that team, as we all know, boys, Montreal loves a winner, and they are loving the Alouettes right now. It's a great draw, but this is a great team that head coach Jason Moss has put together.
Matthew, let's go out on this one. When you talked about the Eastern Final last year, the loss to Montreal, that was, we use the term here, an odd look. All these months later, is there any explanation for how that even happened?
I would say this. Quarterback coach Mike Miller, who has been around the NFL, been around the NCAA, is known as a quarterback whisperer. He is very important to Chad Kelly. Ryan Dinwiddie even said it recently that it's very much like, a young child with his blanket. Quarterback and his quarterback coach can do so many things. And Mike Miller was undergoing medical treatment last year during the East Final. And I watched Chad Kelly as receiver coach Pete Costanza sat next to him. And Pete Costanza is as accomplished a coach as there is at the position in the Canadian Football League, multiple-time Grey Cup winner, but he couldn't get through to Chad Kelly. Mike Miller is back, and that matters to quarterbacks. I know sometimes we may not, look at the details, but quarterback coaches matter. I'm not saying that's wholly the reason, but that is the first instance, guys, that I watched a quarterback, and Chad Kelly can make all the throws on the field. He has the most pro caliber arms, and yet to watch him throw interception after interception after interception, then come back to the sidelines and look off into the middle distance as if he didn't know what was going on, and then to hear that clearly to him, the relationship with his quarterback coach is so important, knowing that Argos defense kept putting them in advantageous situations and the Alouettes couldn't get past the 50-yard line. Well, to be honest, if you're looking for details, maybe that's one of them. But ultimately, this is on the execution of Chad Kelly. If he can come in and play the way that many saw him play for very much 16 weeks, the Argos are going to be a very, very competitive offense. But unfortunately, when it comes to Chad Kelly, there are so many other factors that we have to take into consideration, not just him under center getting ready to take the football.
Matthew, thanks very much. Really appreciate it.
Take care, boys.
Matthew Scianitti, CFL and TSN. I come up with uncomfortable. It's a weird dynamic, and that's probably not the right word to use, but just a weird situation.
Oh, it certainly is. It's beyond weird. It is uncomfortable. It is unfortunate, and Chad Kelly's got a lot to prove. Let's face it. The league would not have been treading so gingerly around this issue and insisting on this last chance agreement if they thought they could trust this guy.
Yeah. It's clearly skepticism on the part of the league, right? But you can't deny the guys.
I just don't think you could condone multiple occasions or infractions like this.
For Chad Kelly?
Well, for anybody. It's inappropriate.
Look, as Scianitti said, there are multiple on-the-record instances where he has shown bad judgment and a lack of self-awareness.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. And if you happen to be the owner of a football team or the commissioner of a football league, it's the kind of problem you don't want to deal with. And you get tired of it at a certain point. You can only have so much of. As much as, look, we all know that your sins are measured against your level of skill in pro sports. That's not new. That's not a CFL problem. That's just reality when it comes to the way pro sports are run. But there are certain sins that no level of skill can overcome, and I think Chad Kelly is his next one will be that one.
Well, that's it. He's run out of all of his chances, right? Like he's a cat, 9 lives. All right, you died 8 times.
He's on 8. Yeah.
He's on 8. He's on his 9th life. The last chance. We'll see if he can stay on the straight and narrow.
Okay, well, we'll leave it at that. Coming up next, Mike Wright will be by, co-host of the Fantasy Footballers podcast. This is Overdrive on TSN 2, streaming online, TSN 1050, and the iHeartRadio app. Overdrive, final half hour for a Wednesday, hump day. Jim Tatti, Dave Feschuk from the Toronto Star, Al's brother here. We're going to dive into some fantasy football and regular football talk with Mike Wright, the co-host of the Fantasy Footballers podcast, very shortly. As we mentioned earlier, Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson has an arm soreness, held out of practice, and Bo Nix is the new quarterback the starting quarterback for the Denver Broncos as we get so close to the start. Oh, so close.
The first rookie to start for the Broncos since, no pressure, only John Elway.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. You know, I've liked what I've seen out of Bo Nix early on. I think that he's played pretty well. He's deserving of the start. I don't necessarily know if he's going to move the needle and all of a sudden the Broncos are a playoff team all of a sudden, but it wasn't a tough competition. He had to come out and look good. He looked all right. Now he's the starter in Denver.
All right, let's bring him in. Mike Wright, co-host of the Fantasy Footballers podcast. Mike, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing all right, man. How you guys doing?
Doing well. Mikey?
I got to ask you this question because off the top, we were talking about fantasy football and we were talking about you coming on, and these two guys, thought that me being in 5 leagues at once, that was my career high last year, was absurd. I am curious, as someone who quite literally his life is fantasy football, what's the most amount of leagues that you participated in 1 year?
I mean, in my career, I've definitely had years of double digits. When we first started the show, it was kind of a say yes to everything, and that was mistakes were made, my friends. Mistakes were made because
no doubt.
Tuesday rolls around and you have to go set waivers, and all of a sudden I got to block off my entire afternoon because I got to go to work and set waivers for everything. And so it's just, that's kind of been when people ask like, hey, how do you know if you're in too many leagues? I say, well, on Tuesday, do you go, like, do you grunt audibly because it's the amount of work where it's not fun anymore? So as long as waivers are fun for people, then you're in the right amount of leagues. So I really have like 2 to 3 what I would call important leagues, and then maybe like 5 or so more where it's just more for fun after that, not as serious.
So, Mike, we were just talking about this getting right before we got you on. Sean Payton named rookie Bo Nix the team's starter after a couple solid outings here in the preseason. What do you make of that decision? And does that make you rethink anything when it comes to the Broncos' position players for fantasy purposes?
No, it was. You had to expect that at some point he was going to take over. Jared Stidham is not the answer for the Denver Broncos long term, and the first round pick and everything on Bo Nix. It just kind of changes the timeline up a bit, where I wasn't expecting great things when Stidham was in charge for fantasy purposes. And look, rookie quarterbacks, it's very, very difficult to have consistent fantasy producers. And I'm talking about like their skill players, not necessarily the running backs. That's a whole discussion of, does Javonte have it anymore? Because it's been a really long time since we've seen the college prospect of Javonte Williams. So like thinking about the wide receivers, rookie quarterbacks, they can hit yards usually. I mean, like look at C.J. Stroud, right? C.J. Stroud is now this fantasy darling heading into his sophomore year, which I can get it. I can see it. He looks like he is the next big quarterback to hit, but his rookie year, while it was fantastic, he was in like the mid-20s or so for passing touchdowns, and it just that's the norm here for these rookie quarterbacks. We don't see a ton of touchdowns, and that's what we really need for these wide receivers to come through. So it doesn't change a lot for me. The Broncos are this offense that's unfortunately there's no one super appealing, and that's pretty reflected in the average draft price of all these players.
So, Mike, this is obviously not the only rookie quarterback that will be the week one starter in the NFL. You got Caleb Williams in Chicago, Jaden Daniels in Washington, and the list goes on. And we don't even know who some of these teams and which way they're going to go. What did you make of Tom Brady's recent comments about this trend? He's basically, I think he used the word tragedy, that the NFL has reduced itself to starting so many rookie quarterbacks. He's saying the league is dumbed down offenses because these guys don't study the playbooks like they used to in the old days, in Tommy's day. What do you make of Brady and his view of the current situation?
Sure, it's tough. I mean, one, I've never been in an actual NFL locker room, but I get it from the perspective of just it. To me, it's almost like society is different. I mean, this is like real philosophical stuff, but it's our attention spans of we need success right now. We're not ready to wait. Well, that probably is the right way to go. I mean, look at the Green Bay Packers. They're on their third quarterback in 3 decades or whatever. And they've been drafting guys in the first round and let them sit and they let them learn and get used to the NFL. We all, out in the community, when they drafted Jordan Love, when they traded up to get Jordan Love, and it wasn't a wide receiver for Aaron Rodgers, we laughed and we laughed. We have a buddy who works for us. He's a diehard Packers fan. We laughed in his face of look how stupid your team is. And, not so stupid now as they look like they have another franchise quarterback. So it would be nice if these guys could sit back and learn. But the way that the NFL works now as a business for these coaches of, you better win by year 2 or else you're going to lose your job. And a way kind of around that is you put your rookie quarterback out there, and that's almost like a job security blanket. I'm doing what you told me to do. I'm playing the rookie quarterback to save my job. So there's a whole lot that goes into it. I don't think Brady is wrong from the sport would be better if we all had the patience. It's just that the business part of the NFL doesn't have patience anymore. There's too much money.
Mike, for drafting, I guess a theory, is Mahomes at the top of your list? And if he isn't, who is?
So right now I would put Josh Allen is still at the top of my fantasy football list for quarterback because he not only is an extremely talented just thrower, to use a silly word to call a quarterback, but I mean, he's regularly putting up 4,500 passing yards. We see him tons of seasons over the 30 passing touchdown threshold. His passing touchdowns were a bit down, but because he was siphoning so many rushing touchdowns this past year. And in fantasy football, the rushing quarterback it's the ultimate cheat code, and it just comes down to the simple math of the game. For most leagues, the standard scoring is when a quarterback runs for 10 yards, they get a point, or they throw for 25 yards and get a point. So I want my guys putting up 40, 50 yards on the ground, the way that Josh Allen can do on any given week. And that doesn't even factor in, there's leagues out there that it's only 4 points for a passing touchdown, but it's 6 for a rushing touchdown. Well, Josh Allen gets a bunch of rushing touchdowns, and those are worth 2 more points than a passing touchdown. So that factors in a big way where Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts isn't as prolific throwing the ball, but he runs just so much that it can be hard for guys like Mahomes to keep up. Not that Mahomes doesn't run, but he doesn't run like the other guys. He's still an elite option, but if I'm going to use my expensive draft capital, I'm going on Josh Allen.
Well, Anthony Richardson's an interesting player who, you look at his ADP, he's expected to be, top 5, 6 quarterback taken in most drafts. And saw some interesting comments coming out of the joint practice between the Colts and Bengals from Bengals players, basically, alluding to the Colts ones and Anthony Richardson not looking crisp, saying all he does is run. I think he was 2 for 8 passing. Didn't look great. Should that be a concern to Colts fans and Anthony Richardson fantasy holders?
Man, Anthony Richardson is such an interesting quarterback prospect of the fact that we're in year 2 of his career and we still have no idea. He was breaking down his college film was so bizarre, man, because you would see a throw where just velocity, accuracy, like this is a throw that half of the quarterbacks in the league can make and half of them cannot, and he's doing it as a college player. And he would follow up with the very next pass of looking like he had no idea how to throw a football. So that those are real fair questions for Richardson of the accuracy. Is it there? In his 2 full starts, we saw it. Week 1 was pretty good, and then his second full game, not very good throwing the ball. But for fantasy specifically, he is a very high risk but also very high reward player. It wouldn't surprise me to see Anthony Richardson with double-digit rushing touchdowns, 700 or so rushing yards, and that's a really big deal. If you're only throwing for in the low 3,000s and you're passing for maybe 20-something touchdowns, if you bump that up with the rushing, you end up there with the big boys at the end of the year, and it's a part of our game that the general public, they're mostly starting to catch on. As you can see, Richardson is the QB 5 or so in ADP, but it's risky business for sure.
A lot of hope in Chicago, Mike, about Caleb Williams and his potential to be that quarterback the Bears never seem to be able to get their hands on, an actual great one. What do you make of that? And in terms of fantasy, is he even on the radar of sort of an off the board pick?
Sure. I mean, he's on the radar of the general public. He's being drafted as a top 12 guy, which I can make the argument either for or against Caleb Williams, but because you see it as he has 3 wide receivers who are being drafted as top 36 wide receivers, that's madness. That is absolute madness, knowing historically what a rookie quarterback has put up. There is no way that at the end of the year, all 3 of those players come through for us for fantasy football. DJ Moore is the number 1, clearing away. I mean, he got the new bag of money. Like, he is absolutely that guy. And then to me, it comes down to between Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze, the first round wide receiver, of which one of those guys can get enough production that you're actually happy with the draft selection. It's very possible that neither of those players hits. But to speak to Caleb specifically, I mean, your best hope for him really is, I'm looking back at Justin Herbert's sensational rookie campaign where he was putting up 22 points a game. Like, that's a really, really high number. In 15 games, 4,300 yards, 31 touchdowns. You're like, that was absolutely electric. So he would have to get close to that. I'm talking about Caleb to actually pay off. And if you look back historically, rookie quarterbacks who have put up 4,300 yards and over 30 passing touchdowns, that's not a big list, boys. That is not a big list at all. So it's just the risk on Caleb is so strong, or is so high, that he's not really on my board. He's one of those guys where it's just like, I'm willing to be wrong about this. I will let someone else take the risk. You can rub it in my face if he actually comes through, but I'm going to bet on the side of decades and decades and decades of rookie quarterbacks in the NFL not giving us what we need.
Mike, as an avid fantasy footballer myself, for years it was the Patriots backfield that was the scariest group to look at in terms of drafting. You didn't know on a weekly basis what was going to happen,
right?
Who was going to get the bulk of carries. Was Rex Burkhead randomly going to have a good game? You just didn't know. You stayed away from it, or at least that was my weekly decision. Is there a murky running back group or a wide receiver situation around the league that kind of you look at and you don't know what to make of it, just because there's just not a lot of answers to this point?
Sure. I'll give you 3 backfields because I think that they're all fascinating. They don't have players being drafted early, and I think all 3 of these teams could end up giving us just a top 24 running back. Number 1 is the Cincinnati Bengals. They're going to be a high-powered offense. Joe Mixon is gone. When Joe Mixon was there, he was a true bell cow, like getting a volume that we that you rarely see in the NFL today. Maybe 4 guys a year hit this type of volume, and he's just been great with it. Zach Moss was kind of the quick addition here in free agency for them, but Chase Brown, second-year player, he's been getting a lot of buzz out of camp. So it's between the two of them, I think I prefer Zach Moss. He's the better pass protector. I think he'll end up being on the field more. The Dallas Cowboys, I mean, they're going to be a top 10 offense. Just look, the CeeDee Lamb concerns, I get it. But at the end of the year, Dallas should be in the top 10. And it's Zeke and it's Rico Dowdle. And Zeke, if you saw Zeke at the end of last year for the Patriots, yeah, he was on the field. Yeah, he was getting a bunch of touches, but this was not the explosive Zeke that we are used to seeing. And all beat reporters out of the Cowboys, everything that I'm seeing and talking to these guys about, it's the best player, the best running back. Once the pads went on, it was easily Rico Dowdle. So I'm going after Rico Dowdle as a late-round sleeper, and then it's the Chargers. They are we call them high T because it's old-school football for the Harbaughs, for Greg Roman. They're going to run the ball as much as they can, and it's Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins right now. Between the two of them, I think I lean Gus Edwards, but it's just if you're in multiple drafts, I'm trying to get some exposure to all 3 of those backfields, at least one of the guys from a couple of those teams. No matter what's going on when I leave a draft, I want them.
Really quickly, Mike, before we let you go, I got to know for the listeners out here, if you had to give me one sleeper, who are you targeting late in drafts right now?
I mean, Rico Dowdle really is my ultimate sleeper. And because I think that he can finish as a top 20 running back. I think that is in his range of outcomes. The other one I'll give you, this is platform specific. So, I mean, like there's tons of, ESPN, Yahoo. We play a lot on this platform called Sleeper. They're a very popular platform now. Taysom Hill is tight end eligible on this platform, and that should not be overlooked with what is going on down in New Orleans. This team loves Taysom Hill more than I think I love anything in my entire life. The way that they utilize him and just put him all over the field. We're getting more and more bad news about Kendre Miller, their second-year running back. We just had a quote from a beat reporter saying, if Taysom Hill has the second most rushing yards on this team by end of year, no one should be surprised. And this is a guy that can go into your tight end spot or your flex spot and just really gets overlooked. Again, platform specific. There's some out there where you can only be a quarterback, and I don't suggest him there. But if you can play Taysom as a tight end, that is a deep sleeper.
Mike, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you guys. Anytime you let me know.
Absolutely. Mike Wright, co-host of the Fantasy Footballers podcast.
There you go. Mike, the Fantasy Hitman. Right. That's his moniker.
Okay.
Fantasy Hitman.
On the way out, Overdrive is brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Best bets are next. Overdrive continues in TSN 2, streaming online, TSN 1050, and the iHeartRadio app. Impressive drumming, I have to say. That's how you start a song. Welcome to the final segment of Overdrive for a Wednesday. Today's best bets are powered by FanDuel. Make your picks and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Doogie, what do you have?
Well, our FanDuel best bets were successful last night. Looking to repeat that this evening. Going to roll with the over 8 on the total runs. It's hit twice in this series so far. Vladdy Guerrero Jr. to record a hit. And Spencer Steer, who's had some damage against this Jays pitching staff, has been pretty solid in this series. So going to go back to the well with 2 reliable hitters, and I expect the runs to be high tonight, and that totals plus 185 on the FanDuel Sportsbook app.
That's it. Today's best bets are powered by FanDuel. First inning means as much as the ninth inning. When you bet baseball on the FanDuel Sportsbook app, please play responsibly. Must be 19 and older and physically located in Ontario. I don't care where your mind is, but physically located in Ontario.
We earlier were discussing that tomorrow they're pushing back some starts in that Angels series.
Right.
Bassett moving back.
Yeah.
Jake Bloss is scheduled to start tomorrow for the AAA Bisons.
Interesting.
I wonder if they bring him up and we get our first look at Jake Bloss tomorrow.
Could be. It makes sense, right? The door is open.
It's, it lines up well. When things line up that well, usually it's for a reason.
Yeah.
Well, it was supposed to be Chris Bassett going tomorrow, and this adds some more eyes on the situation. I think it seems like a pretty good time to allow Bloss the opportunity.
Yeah.
And that twin spin with Boston, the the Jansen
situation.
yeah,
we'll call it?
I'm trying to figure out how to describe
What do we
it.
call it? A
I blanked.
situation?
Yeah,
It's
the Jansen
it's
history
fascinating.
making. Yeah, and that's Monday, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's going to be a fascinating situation there
Okay.
for sure.
All right. Well, let's whenever Bassett starts, let's hope they get that dome closed, right?
No, you
Oh,
want
yeah.
it open.
I mean, open.
You want it. He
Right.
wants it open.
Yeah, it's
He wants it open, right?
He wants it open.
Yeah.
it's a problem with when it's closed.
Apparently.
Yeah. So for the batters too, right?
I don't
No,
know.
shouldn't be a problem.
That
but
was
it is.
that was a ridiculous thing to say.
And
A
the
couple of those out of his mouth recently.
So don't forget, Yes Guy, the radio show tomorrow at 10 a.m. on TSN 1050. And you know what? We're going to do this again tomorrow at
4 p.m.
we'll chat then.
We Will.